We went through the book of Judges and the book of Ruth, looking at that history of God's people and what they had really through the book of Judges, what they had devolved to and the wickedness of the time. And I want to pick up with the book of First Samuel here and continue on in that study there as we look at the history of Israel. And this is uh, when you come into the first part of the book of First Samuel, you're still in the judges period. In fact, Samuel would be the last judge of Israel, and it's during Samuel's uh, time as prophet here that the children of Israel, will choose for themselves a king or want a king. And so thus begins the transition from the period of the judges to the period of the kings of Israel. So I want to just look here with an introduction this evening concerning these books of First and Second Samuel as we get into the study of this and go through this history. Um, the Masoretes titled both books here, First Samuel, Second Samuel, simply the book of Samuel. They gave no division in their translation. The Septuagint put Samuel and the Kings together, so those were simply called the books of the Kings or the book of the kingdoms. And then in 1516, Daniel Baumberg divided Samuel into two different books that we have today in his first edition of his Hebrew Bible. And so that's how we have it in our day. The books are anonymous as far as author is concerned. Suggested authors, along with Samuel being one of the authors, include Abiathar, Nathan, and Gad. The Talmud states Samuel was the author up to chapter 24, and the remainder of First and all of Second Samuel was written by Nathan and Gad, which they say is suggested from First Chronicles chapter 29. First Chronicles chapter number 29 and verse 29. Let me get over here and read that to you. First Chronicles 29 and verse 29 says, "Now the acts of David the king, first and last, behold, they are written in the book of Samuel the seer, and in the book of Nathan the prophet, and in the book of Gad the seer." And so it seems like those were three books that were written and were combined for what we've got today as the book of Samuel, First and Second Samuel. And so part of the book was written after the death of Samuel. In fact, First Samuel 25 tells us concerning his death. And so we know he then did not finish the book since he died in the book. First Samuel 25, verse number 1, and Samuel died, and all the Israelites were gathered together and lamented him and buried him in his house at Ramah. And David arose and went down to the wilderness of Paran. And then in chapter 28 and verse number 3, this is after the mourning for Samuel. After the children of Israel had mourned for him, it says, "And Samuel was dead, and all Israel had lamented him and buried him in Ramah, even in his own city. And Saul had put away those that had familiar spirits and the wizards out of the land." And we even see that some of First Samuel may have even been written after the division of the kingdom of the north and southern kingdom, because there in chapter 27 and verse number 6, it tells us there, it says, "Then Achish gave him Ziklag that day, wherefore Ziklag pertaineth unto the kings of Judah unto this day." And so it seems like even part of the book of First Samuel was not finished until after the division of the kingdoms, north and southern kingdoms there. And so it was a long period that these books cover. But likely the majority of it was completed by 722 BC, because there's no mention there of the Assyrian kingdom falling. Um, and if it had fallen, you think it would have mentioned that somewhere. And so most of the book was probably, these two books were finished at the time of David or shortly after, so around 1025 to 900 BC. That these two books would have been finished. The book covers, First Samuel covers the first two kings of Israel, including the time of Judges, before the first king took his throne. Saul reigning 40 years, David reigning 40 years, and then Solomon in the second Samuel reigning for those 40 years as well. 1 Kings 11:42 tells us that his was 40-year reign. It's interesting that those first three kings, 40 years, 40 years, and 40 years, that God gave each one of them. And so we see here in this book this history of Israel, and this transition from the period of the judges to the period of the kings. And as far as Israel was concerned, there was some improvement, you might say. They grew in great power and wealth, especially under David's reign and then Solomon's reign. Um, Religiously, they go back and forth through these two books. When we take up here in First Samuel, we find the priesthood itself was corrupt. They were taking bribes of the people and robbing the people even. In 1 Samuel 2, for instance, it tells us here, verse 12 through verse number 17, talking about the sons of Eli. It says, "Now the sons of Eli were sons of Belial. They knew not the Lord." Well, preachers that don't know who the Lord is, but that's the case in this day. It's the case in our day as well. Sadly, that's a reality too often. These two sons of Eli used their position as the sons of Eli simply for their own wealth and own betterment. They did not care about the things of the Lord, nor did they care for the people anyway either. It tells us, verse 13, the priest custom with the people was that when any man offered sacrifice, the priest servant came while the flesh was in seething with the flesh hook of 3 teeth in his hand, and he struck it into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot, and all that the flesh hook brought up, the priest took for himself. So they did in Shiloh unto all the Israelites that came thither. Also, before they burnt the fat, the priest's servant came and said to the man that sacrificed, Give flesh to roast for the priest, for he shall not have sodden flesh of thee, but raw. And if any man said unto him, Let them not fail to burn the fat presently, and then take as much as thy soul desireth, then he would answer him, Nay, but thou shalt give it me now, and if not, I will take it by force. Wherefore the sin of the young men was very great before the Lord, for men abhorred the offering of the Lord. And so it was all about the priest getting fed. It wasn't about doing the work of the Lord. It wasn't about the sacrifices that were being offered. They were demanding the meat be given to them before the sacrifice was to take place. They were demanding they would have the freshest cuts and so on of the meat delivered to them as well. And so it was that we find the priesthood corrupt itself when we begin this book. And then you go over to chapter number 8, and we see Samuel's own sons, even. Judges were also corrupt. 1 Samuel 8, verses 2 and 3, it says, Now the name of the firstborn was Joel, and the name of the second Abiah. They were judges in Beersheba, and his sons walked not in his ways, but turned aside after lucre and took bribes and perverted judgment. As Samuel's own sons that were corrupt as well. The people themselves refused to listen to Samuel on many occasions, and one of those was in chapter 8 there again in verse 19 when Samuel was telling them, no, we're going to do government God's way, and we're going to continue with the judges. And the Israelites said, no, 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 we don't want that. We want a king. And so they did not listen to Samuel. Verse 19 says, nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, nay, but we will have a king over us. So the Lord would allow them, because of their stubbornness here, to have that king. There were those, nevertheless, even among the crowd, that were faithfully serving and worshiping the Lord among Israel. We read that in 1 Samuel 1 and verse number 3. We read of Samuel's father. And this man went up out of his city yearly to worship and to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. And the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. This was Elkanah, was Samuel's daddy's name, and he was one that worshiped the Lord and sought to be faithful to the Lord. And so you had those among the children of Israel at this time, just very much like we saw through the book of Judges. God would give deliverance to the children of Israel through one of the judges, and then they would have a period of good times following the Lord, being faithful, being obedient. And then that would go on for a while, and then that judge would die, or something else would come along, and the children of Israel would turn away from God and follow after themselves. For a time, there was no king in Israel, and they did that which was right in their own eyes, is what the scripture would tell us. And so they would follow themselves and do their own thing for a while until the pressure came on them so strong, there would be an enemy that would come against them, and that enemy would tread them down to the point that they would be calling out to the Lord again, and he would bring them deliverance. And once deliverance was given, they would serve him for a time, and then that would go on for a while, and then they would fall away again. And that went back and forth through the book of Judges, and you'll see that here as well through the book of Samuel as well. This worship we find mentioned more probably here in the book of Samuel than we did in the book of Judges, and we'll see more of that faithfulness made mention here in this book. It is at Shiloh where the Ark of the Covenant is. That was the place of worship when we come into the book of Samuel. This, of course, is before Jerusalem is taken and made the capital of Israel. That happens during David's reign. And of course, it was before the temple was built, which happens in Solomon's reign. So during this time, it was at Shiloh, is where the tabernacle was set. This is where the Ark of the Covenant was. We read that there in 1 Samuel 4 and verse number 4. So the people sent to Shiloh, that they may bring from thence the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord of hosts, which dwelleth between the cherubim. And the two sons of Eli, Hophni, and Phinehas were there with the Ark of the Covenant of God. And so that was the place of worship, was in Shiloh at this point. So that's how they stood religiously at this time here in the book of 1 Samuel. Politically, Samuel is the last judge of Israel. The people, again, refused to listen to Samuel's direction and demand a king to be given them so they'd be like all the other nations around them. And so Samuel, by God's direction, anoints Saul as the first king of Israel. And we read that there in 1 Samuel chapter 10 and verse number 1. We see his choosing there in chapter number 9. and his anointing here in chapter 10 and verse 1. It says, Then Samuel took a vial of oil and poured it upon his head and kissed it and said, Is it not because the Lord hath anointed thee to be captain over his inheritance? And so Saul is chosen as king. But then Saul, of course, would disobey God, as we'll get to in our study, and would not follow the direction of God. And so he would be put out as king, be rejected by God. And immediately following that rejection, God sends Samuel to go and anoint David as king. And David is the second king, of course, of Israel. And we read about his anointing there in chapter 16, 1 Samuel 16, and verse number um, let's see, verse number 6 is where we'll begin. So it came to pass when they were come that he looked on Eliab and said, Surely the Lord's anointed is before me. So Jesse's got all of his sons lined up, and Samuel's looking at Jesse's sons. God sent him to Jesse's house. Is one of Jesse's sons that's going to be the king. And so he's got them all lined up there in front of him, and he comes to Eliab first, Eliab being the oldest, and clearly he looks like a king to Samuel. So he says, Surely the Lord's anointed is before me here. And the Lord said unto Samuel, Look not on his countenance or on the height of his stature, because I have refused him. The Lord seeth not as man seeth, for man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. Then Jesse called Abinadab, made him pass before Samuel. And he said, Neither hath the Lord chosen this. Then Jesse made Shammah to pass by. And he said, Neither hath the Lord chosen this. Again, Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel. And Samuel said unto Jesse, The Lord hath not chosen these. And Samuel said unto Jesse, Are here all thy children? And he said, There remaineth yet the youngest, and behold, he keepeth the sheep. And Samuel said unto Jesse, Send and fetch him, for we will not sit down till he come hither. And he went and brought him in. Now he was ruddy and withal of a beautiful countenance, and goodly to look to. And the Lord said, Arise, anoint him, for this is he. And Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brethren. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel rose and went to Ramah. And so here David is anointed. So Samuel is privileged with this anointing of the first 2 kings of Israel here during his time as this judge of Israel and prophet of Israel here in the first book. The Philistines would be their chief enemy during this time, their chief threat. They had recently migrated from the Aegean Islands and Asia Minor and had settled there on the western part of the nation of Israel, the western part of Canaan there. And they were trouble to the children of Israel as soon as they come into place. And they begin to cause issues, cause trouble, attacking them, trying to keep them down. In chapter 13, we read of some of the oppression there of the Philistines against the children of Israel. Verse 19 down through verse 22, it says, Now there was no smith found throughout the land of Israel, for the Philistines said, Lest the Hebrews make them swords or spears. And so the Philistines would not allow a blacksmith to be allowed in the land of Israel. Because they were afraid they would make spears or swords if they had an opportunity. And so they wanted to keep them weaponless. That sounds like familiar territory when we read about these countries in our own day that do not want their citizens to have weapons because the citizens might actually defend themselves. And this is one of those things we see played out here with the nation of Israel. So they did not want them to have weapons. And so if you needed your axe sharpened or you needed a goad sharpened for your cattle herding, you'd have to go to a Philistine smith and have them sharpen it for you, so that you wouldn't be making your own weapons in that day. And you can read on down through there as he speaks of that. There was no smith found, and so if they wanted anything sharpened, they had to go to the Philistines to have it sharpened. And so this politically, this was the situation that they were in. Even while Saul and David reigned, there was constant fighting against the Philistines. And we have in these two books here some miraculous and wonderful victories that God gives the children of Israel against these Philistines at the time, um, as they would face with Israel on the battlefield. And we see God's deliverance for the children of Israel over and over and over again there. We see in this book how God rules over his creation, even in governmental affairs. We see him setting up the kingdom and the people. 1 Samuel chapter 9, verse 16 and 17. He says, tomorrow about this time I will send thee a man out of the land of Benjamin. Now shalt anoint him to be captain over my people Israel. Excuse me, that he may save my people out of the hand of the Philistines, for I have looked upon my people because their cry is come unto me. And when Samuel saw Saul, the Lord said unto him, behold, the man whom I spake to thee of, this same shall reign over my people. And so God appoints them the king. He commands the children of Israel during this time as well, and commands their kings. Here in 1 Samuel 15, verses 2 and 3, we read of the command to Saul here concerning his battle with Amalek. It says, thus saith the Lord of hosts, I remember that which Amalek did to Israel, how he laid wait for him in the way when he came up from Egypt. Now go and smite Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass. And so God tells Saul, you go down and destroy everything in Amalek, destroy it all. Of course, Saul would not. And so, because Saul did not do as God commanded, Saul would be put down as king and not allowed to continue his reign. God would reject him, and David then would be chosen as king. We read there in verse 26 of the same passage, and Samuel said unto Saul, I will not return with thee, for thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord hath rejected thee from being king over Israel. He says in verse 28, and Samuel said unto him, the Lord hath rent the kingdom of Israel from thee this day, and hath given it to a neighbor of thine. It is that is better than thou. And so the kingdom was taken from Saul and given to another because of his disobedience of the commands of God. We'll see not only God reigning there over them, giving them direction and commandment, we'll see the working of the Spirit of God to empower his people to do divinely appointed tasks that could only be done by God, empowered by God. We see there in chapter 10 and verse number 6, and the Spirit of the Lord will come upon thee, and thou shalt prophesy with them, and shalt be turned into another man. The Spirit of the Lord shall come upon thee. Verse 10, and when they came thither to the hill, behold, a company of prophets met him, and the Spirit of God came upon him, and he prophesied among them, just as the Lord said he would do. And then in chapter 11 and verse 6, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon Saul when he heard those tidings, and his anger was kindled greatly. And so we see the Spirit of God empowering them to go forth, do the work that he's commanded them to do, the very work even that he has declared that they would do. And we'll see that as we study through this book. We'll see the effects of sin on the children of Israel, Eli and his sons. 1 Samuel chapter 2, chapter 3, and chapter 4. We'll kind of begin in this study there in this book with the sin of Eli's sons and what effect it has on Israel. We'll see the effects of sin on Israel in regards to the ark of the Lord in 1 Samuel chapter 6 and verse 19. We'll see concerning the effects of sin on Saul and his rejection by God there, not only from chapter 15 that we just looked at, but also chapter 13 as well. We see this effects of that's on Saul, and then the effects of sin on David when we get over in the second Samuel chapter number 12. We see how that sin affects David and his reign as well. In all of these studies and all of these books, as we look through them, we're going to see the sovereignty of God at work for his people. And we'll see how he moves and works among them to bring to pass his will for them. We'll see the Davidic covenant in 1 Samuel chapter 7 declared. And then we'll see the grace of God for his people throughout these two books, and how the Lord is faithful to care and to take care of his people and continually provide for them amongst even the enemies that are around them in the land, but also even in the midst of their own failure and their own sin, and God's grace shining through for his people and continuing to bless them and keep them even in those times of wickedness on their part. Um, this this history that we'll be looking at is integral to understand what takes place later on as you go through First Samuel and Second Samuel, and you see the reigns there of Saul and of David, and then of Solomon, and of course after Solomon's reign, um, the tiredness, I guess is the word to use there, of the people because of Solomon's reign. It was taxing on them physically and emotionally. And so that taxing that came upon them there, that would cause a stir. And of course, after Solomon's death, the kingdom was divided between Solomon's son Rehoboam and Jeroboam, one who was chosen as king of the northern tribes. And that division would occur and in the kingdom, and you see from that point the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And the southern kingdom comprised of the nation of Judah and the nation of Benjamin, and the rest, the other 10 tribes, belonging to the northern kingdom. And at that point, you see wholly the northern kingdom given to idolatry, beginning with the reign of Jeroboam all the way through when they are taken into captivity by the nation of Assyria. They continue in that wickedness, they continue in their idolatry from the beginning there of the division of the kingdoms. Under Rehoboam, you have the southern kingdom beginning, and they go back and forth in the southern kingdom. You'll have a wicked king that did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, or you would have a godly king that did that which was right in the sight of the Lord. And throughout Israel's or Judah's history from that point forward, you have that continuation back and forth of an evil king and a good king, and an evil king and a good king. And the good king would come in and he would straighten up most everything the bad king did. But then another bad king would come along and he would undo everything that the good king had done. And so it was back and forth like that until the Babylonian captivity, when Nebuchadnezzar would come in and take, of course, King Zedekiah was the last king of the nation of Judah there, and he would come in and take Zedekiah captive, blind him after he killed his sons. He would blind him and take him into captivity, and he would send a former king back to rule over Israel as a um, as a fiefdom state, if you will. He would a serfdom state where he would rule from Babylon and command what he wanted from them, and they would give him tribute, and he would leave them kind of intact there with this appointed king, much like would happen later on when we get into the New Testament era with the Herods ruling at the proxy as the proxies of Rome, and yet the children of Israel left roughly alone as long as they were paying their taxes to the Roman government. That's kind of what was going on with Nebuchadnezzar when he first left the children of Israel in taking the greater part into captivity and leaving those in the land with a king ruling over them. But then even that king would rebel against Babylon, and he also would be uh, taken over, and the land was left in destruction at that point. Um, so you've got this continuation all the way through through the history of the kings here, in which we'll, Lord willing, we'll get to that as we go through these first two books here of Samuel, and then into the Chronicles and the Kings, and look there at those that division and those kings, Lord willing, as we go on. So that's what we're going to be looking at in the next little bit. We'll do this on Sunday nights as we Sunday afternoons, I should say, as we study going through these passages. And of course, next time we'll begin there with the birth of Samuel and how Samuel comes to be, as we'll see there by the prayers of his mother, who wanted so much to have a child, a son, that she promised to give unto the Lord. And we find the birth of Samuel, this next judge of the nation of Israel. And we'll see his desire to follow and serve the Lord as he grows in the things of the Lord over these next few chapters. Any questions on that little bit of an introduction? I rushed through a whole lot of stuff there, but hopefully it'll unfold and you'll be able to see it as we go into it. Mm-mm. That's on anything, not just weapons. That's on anything. Yeah.